regard this as a amendment at all. I think it's a very thoughtful one. And I think this particular amendment has been on a journey, but that journey is one of which unintentional consequences have occurred. I'm very sympathetic because I went through the same process myself a few years ago after the 2017 election, when the prospect of a Jeremy Corbyn prime ministership was a real and present danger. And I certainly could see the possibility that the Holocaust Memorial would turn into some kind of genocide museum or genocide and slavery museum, and that it would be completely watered down. And I spent a lot of time worrying and a lot of time trying to find ways around it. And I have to say this, that if there had been a Jeremy Corbyn government with that intent, I don't think there would be very much this House could have done to prevent it. But the noble gentleman is right. Genocide has been used in a almost flippant way in terms of trying to describe things. We've had instances in which people who have refused to take injections, immunisation, and have compared themselves to the Jews. We've heard Nobel prelates describe the environment problems as a Holocaust. So I think it is important to recognise why the Holocaust was unique. And I think members around the chamber will remember our dear friend David Cesarani, sadly no longer with us, a very distinguished British historian of the Holocaust. And David had this ability to be able to put things very neatly. And in 26 words, he managed to sum up what the Holocaust is. And I quote from him: "The Holocaust invoked the systematic use of state powers, modern bureaucratic methods, scientific thinking, and killing methods adopted from the industrial production systems." And there's been no subsequent Holocaust. There were no prior Holocausts that would fall into that definition, except one. And that's why the manuscript amendment is so important, so vital, because, of course, the Roma and the Sinti genocide was identical to what happened in the Holocaust, in that the individuals were selected not because of what they did, not because of what they thought, not because of their sexual preferences, but because they were Roma or Sinti. They were killed in ghettos, they were murdered in Auschwitz. It was an attempt to annihilate a race. And the previous amendment before this would have effectively ruled them out. I just wanted to make that clear because there's already been quite a bit of speculation that this was an attempt to push out the Roma and the Sinti. Now, I think we want to make it absolutely clear that's not the intention of the proposer, and it will never be the intention of this House. So I'm very sympathetic, but forgive me if I just probe a little. I may be wrong on this, and I'd like the Minister to give a reply. As I read it, if you did a commemoration inside the Learning Centre without education, would that be in contradiction to this very sensible amendment? And if that is the case, because I do believe that the amendment is an important one, is there some way that the magic of the usual channels can fix any defect that occurs? And I'm looking at the most distinguished member of the usual channels, and I hope he'll give active consideration to this, should that be the case. But if I'm wrong, I'll be delighted.
My Lords, some years ago I visited the Dachau concentration camp just outside of Munich, and it had a huge impression on me as did visiting the Memorial and Learning Centre in Jerusalem and in Berlin. But one thing particularly struck me, perhaps because it touched me personally, was that in Dachau there was a display of the different badges which prisoners in the concentration camp were required to wear. And one of those badges was a pink triangle, which was reserved for the prisoners who were detained there by reason of the fact that they were homosexual. Some 50,000 people are estimated to have been given severe life sentences by the Nazis, and some 15 to 20,000 were sent to concentration camps for being homosexual. Most of them either died or were killed. Some were subject to horrific experiments, including castration. I think it is the effect of the Noble Lord's Amendment that the Learning Centre should not provide information or education about that part of the atrocities which we saw perpetrated by Nazi Germany. Sometimes the word Holocaust has been used to include those atrocities. I understand, of course, the force of his argument and the purpose of his amendment, his wish to reserve the education centre and its focus on the appalling crime of genocide, attempted genocide that was perpetrated against Jewish people. But if homosexuals who were also targeted by the Nazi regime are to be excluded from this learning centre, then I think we should acknowledge that and be conscious of it, and perhaps alternative educational provision can be made. Or if they should be included and the atrocities were committed to a smaller number of people, but by the same regime, with the same sort of motive, then I'm not sure that the amendment allows for that, and should perhaps itself be amended at a later stage should this House accept this amendment tonight. I do not in any way seek to belittle the crime of attempted genocide against the Jewish people, of course not. Nor do I think we should ignore or belittle what was done to people by the same Nazi regime simply because they were gay.
I think the discussion that has gone on so far indicates just how ambiguous is the point of this learning centre, and no one still knows exactly what it is going to teach and what is going to be in it. I heard the presentation of Martin Winston, and what I recall from that is that he didn't know what was the lesson that was to be learned, and that the centre was not going to combat anti-Semitism. Variously, over the last few years, I've asked many questions about which genocides are going to be included. I've had various answers from the ministers, including Baroness Scott of Bybrook, the noble lady, and different answers in written questions. And sometimes we're told it's the Rohingya, it's Kosovo, other times we're told it's all the people who were victims of the Nazis. This indicates to me no learning clarity about what is going on. Most of the other Holocaust memorials around the world address a question which is very painful for this government and this parliament, which is that the British government closed the doors of Palestine in the 1930s and indeed even after the war. And I always think how many more people might have been saved, maybe millions, if Britain had abandoned the mandate and allowed Israel to be created in 1938 rather than 1948. And this country bears that responsibility, as it did after the war, when it still would not let people into what was evolving into Israel. And these are difficult questions that have to be addressed. And the late Lord Sax